24th February 1963. Chicago. The Blue Note Club, midnight approaching. Louis Armstrong was on stage playing his trumpet. The room was packed, 200 people. Everyone had surrendered to the music. But in the back corner sat a special table. 3 men. One of them was Vincent Romano, one of Chicago's most influential businessmen, a man whose word carried weight, someone everyone knew, many feared. Louis was in the middle of his performance, singing "What a Wonderful World," that famous Satchmo smile on his face. The audience was mesmerized, but Vincent, from his corner table, spoke loudly, talking to his companions, but loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Look at that smile! Like he's living in some fantasy world, grinning like everything's perfect." The room froze. Vincent Romano was mocking Louis Armstrong? Seriously? People looked at each other. Nobody was breathing. Louis heard. He didn't stop the music, but his smile trembled for a moment. The song ended. Applause, but tense applause. Louis didn't leave the stage. He walked to the microphone, looked at Vincent. Everyone waited. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. What would happen? What would Louis do? Nobody could predict, because what happened in the moments after that would be more astonishing than anyone in that room could possibly imagine. Before we explore this incredible story of grace, under pressure, and unexpected transformation, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. What you're about to witness will restore your faith in the power of kindness to change even the hardest hearts. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened that February night at the Blue Note Club, we need to go back several months. We need to understand what Louis Armstrong was experiencing in early 1963. Because that moment with Vincent Romano wasn't just about one man's mockery. It was about Louis's lifetime of dealing with criticism, disrespect, and impossible expectations while maintaining his dignity and kindness no matter what. November 10th, 1962. 3.5 months before that club encounter, Louis Armstrong sat in his doctor's office in New York receiving troubling news. Dr. Alexander Schiff reviewed test results with visible concern. "Louis, your heart is under tremendous strain. Your blood pressure is dangerously elevated. The constant touring, the stress from criticism, it's affecting your health severely. You need to reduce your schedule by at least 50%. At 61 years old, Louis had been performing professionally for over 44 years. The pace had never slowed. 1962 had been particularly brutal, not just physically, but emotionally. Hello, Dolly was climbing the charts, would eventually reach number 1, making Louis the oldest artist to ever achieve that milestone. It should have been pure triumph. Instead, it brought waves of criticism from multiple directions. Young bebop musicians dismissed his traditional style as outdated. Civil rights activists criticized him for not being militant enough in his activism. Some called him Uncle Tom for smiling on stage, for entertaining white audiences, for not using his platform more aggressively to fight racism. These attacks hurt Louis profoundly, not because he doubted his choices. He knew why he did what he did, but because after spending his entire life breaking barriers, opening doors, and fighting racism through excellence and dignity, being called a sellout by his own community was devastating. Louis had lived through racism these young critics couldn't imagine, had performed in segregated venues while quietly refusing to accept second-class treatment, had spoken out against injustice when it could have cost him everything, including his famous 1957 criticism of President Eisenhower over the Little Rock school crisis. But because Louis smiled on stage, because he brought joy to audiences of all races, some activists dismissed his entire lifetime of work as insufficient, as accommodating, as betraying the cause. The stress manifested physically. Chest pains became more frequent, breathing difficulties, exhaustion that rest couldn't cure. Louis's body was breaking down under the weight of trying to be everything to everyone while staying true to himself. December 5th, 1962. Louis was performing in Detroit when something happened that shook him deeply. A group of young black protesters stood outside the venue with signs. Armstrong sells out. Stop grinning. Start fighting. Dignity over entertainment. Louis saw them as he arrived. Each sign felt like a personal attack. These were young black Americans, the very people his success was supposed to inspire and uplift. And they were calling him a traitor. That night's performance was technically perfect. Louis played brilliantly, but inside he was breaking. After the show, alone in his dressing room, Lucille found him crying. "Baby, what's wrong?" Louis showed her a newspaper clipping, a review from a young jazz critic calling Louis' smile embarrassingly subservient and questioning whether his continued popularity was based on making white audiences comfortable rather than artistic merit. Lucille held him close. "Louis, you know that's not true. Your smile comes from joy, from loving what you do. Don't let bitter people take that away from you." But Louis wasn't entirely convinced. What if they're right, Lucille? What if I should be angrier, more confrontational? What if my approach is wrong? Those doubts plagued Louis throughout late 1962 and into early 1963. Every performance felt like he was defending his choices. Every smile felt scrutinized. Every moment of joy on stage felt like it needed justification. January 20th, 1963. 1 month before the Vincent Romano encounter. Louis had a serious conversation with his longtime friend and fellow musician, Dizzy Gillespie. They sat in Louis's hotel room after a show, talking about the criticism both faced from different directions. Dizzy looked at Louis with concern. "Pops, you look exhausted, not just physically, spiritually." Louis nodded slowly. "I'm tired, Dizzy. Tired of being criticized for being myself. Tired of people questioning my blackness because I smile. Tired of having to explain that bringing joy to people is its own form of resistance." Dizzy leaned forward. "You don't have to explain anything to anyone, Pops. Your life speaks for itself, what you've accomplished, the doors you've opened, the barriers you've broken. That's your legacy. Don't let angry young people who haven't lived what you've lived make you doubt yourself." Louis appreciated those words, but the doubt lingered. The exhaustion remained. The pressure continued. To understand what happened at the Blue Note Club, we also need to understand who Vincent Romano was. Vincent was 48 years old in February 1963. He'd built a business empire in Chicago through a combination of legitimate ventures and connections that people didn't ask too many questions about. He owned restaurants, nightclubs, real estate. His word carried enormous weight in Chicago's business community. Vincent had grown up in poverty on Chicago's South Side. His father had been a factory worker who died young from overwork. His mother cleaned houses to support Vincent and his 3 siblings. Vincent learned early that the world was hard, that kindness was weakness, that only power and money mattered. By his late 20s, Vincent had clawed his way into Chicago's business world. By his 40s, he was one of the city's most influential figures, feared by many, respected by some, truly understood by few. Vincent had a reputation for being hard, unforgiving, someone who didn't tolerate disrespect or weakness. His worldview was simple. The world was divided into the strong and the weak. The strong took what they wanted. The weak smiled and accepted their lot. In Vincent's mind, smiling meant submission, joy meant naivety, optimism meant ignorance of reality's harshness. This worldview would collide dramatically with Louis Armstrong on that February night. But there was something Vincent didn't know about himself. Deep inside, buried under decades of hardness and cynicism, was a part of him that still remembered being a poor kid who loved music, who'd listened to jazz on a neighbor's radio and felt something stir in his soul, who dreamed of a world beyond factory work and poverty. That part of Vincent had been suppressed for so long he'd forgotten it existed. But it was still there, waiting. Have you ever judged someone based on appearances only to discover you completely misunderstood them? Share your experience in the comments. February 24th arrived, the night that would change both Louis Armstrong and Vincent Romano. Louis was in Chicago for a 3-night engagement at the Blue Note Club, a legendary jazz venue, intimate, only 200 capacity. The kind of place where you could see the sweat on a performer's face, hear every note with crystal clarity. Vincent Romano had been invited by the club owner, a business associate. Vincent didn't particularly care about jazz, but he did care about being seen at important venues, about maintaining his network, about his reputation. So he came, brought 2 associates, took the best table in the back corner. Vincent arrived during the opening act, ordered expensive whiskey, talked business with his companions, barely paid attention to the music. When Louis Armstrong took the stage at 11:30, the audience erupted in applause. Louis was a legend. People had come from across Chicago and beyond to see him perform at such an intimate venue. Louis walked onto the small stage carrying his trumpet, that famous Satchmo smile on his face, wearing a sharp suit. At 61, Louis still had incredible stage presence. He opened with "When the Saints Go Marching In," upbeat, joyful. The crowd loved it, clapping along, some dancing in their seats. Vincent watched with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. He saw Louis's smile, the way Louis interacted with the audience, the joy radiating from the stage. And Vincent's cynical mind interpreted it as fakeness, as performance, as someone putting on a show of happiness that couldn't possibly be genuine. The second song was Basin Street Blues, Louis's trumpet singing with that distinctive vibrato, his gravelly voice telling the story. Beautiful, emotional, authentic. But Vincent saw it differently. To him, Louis looked like someone entertaining white folks, grinning and performing, reinforcing Vincent's belief that success meant compromising your dignity. Vincent leaned to one of his companions, spoke loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Look at this guy smile, like he's never had a hard day in his life. Must be nice living in a fantasy world." The people at neighboring tables shifted uncomfortably. Was Vincent Romano really criticizing Louis Armstrong? During his performance, Louis continued playing, but those nearby saw his smile falter for just a second. He'd heard. Of course he'd heard. Vincent, emboldened by his companion's nervous laughter, continued, "All that grinning. That's what they want from him. That's how he made his money. Smiling for people." The atmosphere in the club changed. The joy evaporated, replaced by tension, discomfort. People stopped focusing entirely on the music. Now they were watching the dynamic between the stage and Vincent's table. Louis finished Basin Street Blues. The applause was genuine, but muted, confused. People didn't know what to do. Louis stood at the microphone, looked directly at Vincent's table. The club went completely silent. Everyone held their breath. Please subscribe if you want to see how Louis Armstrong handled this incredibly difficult moment. His response will teach you something profound about grace and strength. Louis spoke, his voice calm, no anger, no defensiveness, just that distinctive Louis Armstrong voice. Gentle but carrying authority earned through decades of artistry and perseverance. "Sir, I see you're troubled by my smile. I want you to know something. This smile isn't fake. It's not performance. It's survival. It's resistance. It's victory." Vincent looked up, surprised that Louis was addressing him directly. The entire club watched. Nobody moved. Louis continued, "You see, when I was growing up in New Orleans, in the poorest black neighborhood you can imagine, I had 2 choices. Let the hardship make me hard, or find something to smile about anyway. I chose the smile, not because life was easy, because it was hard." Louis's voice remained gentle, not confrontational, just honest. "I've faced racism you can't imagine, been denied entry to restaurants, hotels, had to use separate bathrooms, separate water fountains, been threatened, been insulted, all because of my skin color. So believe me, sir, I know about hard realities." Vincent sat frozen. This wasn't the response he'd expected. Louis kept going. "But here's what I learned. Anger and bitterness were trying to claim my soul, and I refused to give them that power. My smile isn't about denying hardship. It's about refusing to let hardship define me. It's about choosing joy even when the world gives me every reason to choose bitterness." The club was absolutely silent, every person riveted. "You think my smile makes me weak? Let me tell you what strength is. Strength is facing a world that tells you you're less than human and responding with music so beautiful it touches souls. Strength is being insulted and responding with dignity. Strength is choosing to bring joy instead of spreading the pain you've received." Louis paused. Let his words sink in. Vincent's face had changed. The smirk was gone. Something else was happening. Something unexpected. Sir, I don't know your story. Don't know what hardships made you see the world the way you do. But I see pain behind that tough exterior. I see someone who decided long ago that the only way to survive is to be hard, to never show vulnerability, to mock joy because you're afraid of it. Vincent's companions looked at him nervously. Nobody talked to Vincent Romano this way. Nobody. But Louis wasn't being aggressive. He was being compassionate, understanding, human. I'm not judging you for that choice. We all do what we need to survive. But I want you to know, there's another way. You can survive and still smile. You can be strong and still show joy. You can protect yourself and still remain human. Louis picked up his trumpet. Now I'm going to play something for you, not to prove anything, not to change your mind, just because it's what I do. I make music. I bring joy. That's my purpose. That's my resistance. That's my strength. And Louis began to play What a Wonderful World, slowly, tenderly. Every note carrying the weight of everything he'd just said, carrying his entire life story, carrying his choice to find beauty in a world that had given him every reason to find only ugliness. As Louis played, something happened in that club. The tension didn't just ease, it transformed. People weren't just hearing music, they were witnessing something profound, a demonstration of grace, of strength through vulnerability, of power through kindness. Vincent Romano sat at his table, and for the first time in decades, tears formed in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, tried to maintain his hard exterior, but Louis's music, Louis's words, had cracked something open inside him, something he'd buried long ago. When Louis finished, silence hung in the air for a full 5 seconds. Then the applause started. Not just applause. People were crying, standing. Not because the performance was technically brilliant, though it was, but because they'd witnessed transformation, connection, humanity at its finest. Louis nodded to the audience, looked once more at Vincent, and smiled. That Satchmo smile. But now everyone in the room understood what that smile really meant. Not naivety, not performance, but choice, strength, victory over bitterness. Louis left the stage for a break. The audience buzzed with conversation. What had just happened? Had they really witnessed Louis Armstrong calmly responding to mockery with such wisdom and grace? Had they really seen Vincent Romano, one of Chicago's hardest men, move to tears? Vincent sat at his table, silent. His companions didn't know what to say. Finally, Vincent stood up, walked toward the backstage area. The club owner intercepted him nervously. Mr. Romano, I apologize for any... Vincent raised his hand. I need to see him. Armstrong, I need to talk to him. The owner hesitated. Sir, I'm not sure. Please. Vincent's voice was different, softer, almost broken. I need to apologize. The owner led Vincent backstage to Louis's dressing room, knocked. Louis opened the door, saw Vincent. There was no fear in Louis's eyes, no anger, just calm presence. Vincent stood there, this powerful man who scared so many people, and struggled to speak, finally managed. I'm sorry. I was wrong. About everything. Louis nodded gently. Come in. They talked for 20 minutes, just the two of them. Nobody knows exactly what was said. But when Vincent emerged, his face had changed. The hardness was still there, but something else too. Something softer, more human. Vincent returned to his table, told his companions they were leaving. As they walked out, Vincent stopped at the club owner's station, left an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. A note attached, for Mr. Armstrong, with deepest respect. 1 week passed. Louis and Lucille were back in New York when a phone call came. From Chicago. Vincent Romano's assistant. Mr. Romano would like to invite you and your wife to dinner. This Saturday evening. At Ristorante Milano. It will be closed to the public for the evening. Just for you. Louis was surprised. Closed to the public? Yes, sir. Mr. Romano has rented the entire restaurant for the evening. He wants to apologize properly. To thank you, please. It would mean very much to him. Louis looked at Lucille. She shrugged. Your call, baby. Louis thought for a moment, then said yes. That Saturday evening, Louis and Lucille flew to Chicago. A car picked them up, drove them to Ristorante Milano, one of the finest Italian restaurants in the city. When they arrived, the restaurant was indeed closed, empty except for one table, set beautifully, candles, flowers. Vincent Romano stood waiting, wearing a suit, looking nervous. When Louis and Lucille entered, Vincent approached, extended his hand. "Mr. Armstrong, Mrs. Armstrong, thank you for coming. I know this is unusual, but I needed to do this right." They sat. Vincent had arranged for the restaurant's chef to prepare a special meal, 7 courses, the finest wine, everything perfect. At first, the conversation was awkward. Vincent didn't know how to express what he was feeling, but gradually, as the evening progressed, he opened up, told Louis and Lucille his story, his childhood poverty, his father's early death, his mother's struggles, how he'd built his success on the belief that the world was harsh and only the strong survived. "But that night," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion, "when you spoke to me, when you played, something broke open inside me, something I'd locked away for 30 years. He looked at Louis directly. "You showed me that strength doesn't mean hardness, that surviving doesn't mean losing your humanity, that you can face the world's cruelty and still choose kindness." Louis listened, that gentle Louis presence, understanding, not judging. "You could have had me thrown out," Vincent continued, "could have embarrassed me, made me look small in front of everyone. Instead, you treated me with more respect than I deserved, more than I'd shown you. Why?" Louis thought for a moment, then spoke. "Because I've learned something over 61 years. Hurt people, hurt people. When someone lashes out, it's usually because they're in pain. You weren't really mocking me. You were expressing your own pain, your own fear, and pain doesn't deserve more pain. It deserves compassion." Vincent's eyes filled with tears again. This hard man who'd spent decades building walls. "I don't know how to be different, don't know how to be softer. It's not who I am anymore." Louis smiled gently. "You don't have to change overnight. You don't have to become someone else. Just maybe. When you feel that hardness rising, remember, there's another option. That's all. Just remember." They talked for hours about music, about life, about struggle and survival, about finding joy in dark places, about the choice to be kind even when the world is cruel. When the evening ended, Vincent walked Louis and Lucille to their car, shook Louis's hand. "Thank you for seeing me, the real me, not the hard shell, but the person underneath I'd forgotten existed." Louis squeezed his hand. "That person was always there. You just needed reminding." As the car drove away, Lucille looked at Louis. "You changed that man's life tonight, baby." Louis shook his head. "No, I just reminded him who he really was. The change was his choice." What happened after that night became part of Chicago legend. Vincent Romano didn't become a completely different person overnight, but he changed, gradually. He started treating people differently. His employees noticed first, less harshness, more patience, more humanity. He started supporting charities, particularly ones helping poor children in Southside Chicago. Kids like he'd been. He never forgot Louis Armstrong. Every year on February 24th, he sent flowers to Louis's home. A note attached, "Thank you for teaching me what strength really means." When Louis Armstrong passed away in July 1971, Vincent Romano flew to New York for the funeral, stood in the back, crying. After the service, he approached Lucille. "Mrs. Armstrong, your husband saved my life. Not in the obvious way, but in a deeper way. He reminded me I was human, that I could be strong and kind, hard and gentle, successful and compassionate. I'll never forget him." Lucille hugged Vincent. "He never forgot you either. He talked about that night often. Said it reminded him why he did what he did, why his smile mattered." Today that story is still told in Chicago, about the night Louis Armstrong faced mockery with grace, responded to disrespect with wisdom, chose kindness over anger, and in doing so, changed a hard man's heart. The Blue Note Club no longer exists. Ristorante Milano closed years ago. Vincent Romano passed away in 1985. But the lesson from that February night lives on. That true strength isn't about being hard. It's about choosing kindness, even when you have every reason to be bitter. That your smile, your joy, your humanity aren't weaknesses. They're the highest forms of resistance against a world that tries to make you cruel. That when someone mocks you, attacks you, tries to diminish you, you have a choice. You can respond with anger. or you can respond with understanding, with grace, with the recognition that hurt people, and the way to break that cycle is through compassion. Louis Armstrong understood this, lived it, taught it through his music and his life. That February night, he taught it to Vincent Romano, and through that teaching, reminded everyone watching that the most powerful force in the world isn't anger or hardness or cynicism. It's love. It's grace. It's the choice to smile, even when the world gives you every reason to frown. Thank you, Louis Armstrong, for the music that touched millions, for the joy you brought to countless lives. But most of all, for showing us that strength and kindness aren't opposites, that you can face the world's cruelty and respond with grace, that your smile wasn't weakness, it was your greatest strength. The lights at the Blue Note are long dark. The table where Vincent sat is gone. The restaurant where they shared dinner has closed. Louis and Vincent are both gone now. But that night remains, teaching, inspiring, reminding that one moment of grace can change a life. That one choice to respond with kindness instead of anger can transform even the hardest heart. That your smile, your joy, your choice to find beauty in a harsh world, that's not naivety. That's not weakness. That's not ignorance. That's power. Real power, the kind that changes lives, the kind that breaks through decades of hardness and cynicism and fear, the kind that reminds someone who they really are underneath all the walls they've built. That February night in Chicago, that mockery, that response, that transformation, forever teaching us what true strength looks like. Not in dominating others, but in maintaining your humanity no matter what. Not in being hard, but in choosing softness even when hardness seems safer. Not in spreading the pain you've received, but in offering grace instead. Louis Armstrong's smile, mocked that night, defended with wisdom, vindicated through grace, still teaching us, still inspiring us, still reminding us that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's helping them remember their humanity. Always. Forever.